Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Love podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and we have an interesting conversation we're going to be having today. I don't think we had somebody like our guest today on the show yet. So 400 plus episodes in, I don't know, maybe we're even at 500. I have no idea what we're up to as far as episode numbers. They don't give me that here when we do the recording. But there's always room for a new conversation, and I'm excited to jump into that one today. So our guest today is John Brocas. John is the founder of Help Lawyer, a respected content media platform for law firms. Over 1,000 law firms there on that platform. But John is moving in another direction. He has a lot of experience from his days in the British Army and and I'll let him talk about it. I don't want to say the wrong terminology, but he has a lot of experience around grief, and he wants to talk to us about understanding grief when it comes to interacting with our clients who are dealing with that. So some of you are in areas of law where perhaps you're not dealing with this, but in other areas of law we are. And you know, he talks about wrongful death, and we're going to get into that conversation. But I think this is very appropriate for our attorneys who are dealing in family law, where they're dealing with a divorce, which is really the death of a marriage. And there's a lot of the same stages of grief that somebody goes through with a death that they go through in the death of their marriage. And why in the world would it matter to you, right? Like, why should you care about how they feel? And we have a great episode on this podcast that we did in the past. We had somebody come on and talk to us about the importance of how you relate to your client when they come in to work with you. And I invite you to go and listen to that. My team is actually behind the scenes looking up the episode numbers. So I'm going to circle back and give it to you, and we'll put it in the show notes. But I think that's a really good episode to listen to leading into this one to understand why it's so important. But you can also get it, right? Like when somebody is looking for a lawyer, they might be looking for somebody who's going to get them the best outcome. But chances are the one who's going to get the work is the one who was the most empathetic with them, is the one who they connected with the best. And if you understand the process that they are going through, if you understand the stages that they go through, and you understand how to relate to them at the stage they're in their grief process, you will be the most relatable attorney that they see. And that is going to ultimately be how they decide who they're going to work with. And that is also going to allow you to work with them in a different way throughout the engagement, to then have a client who leaves who really feels like you catered to them, who really feels like you took care of them through that process. And I'm sure John is going to color this in a little bit better for us. But we can already understand how important a conversation like this is. So if you started off saying, hey, I don't know how this relates to me, understand that it relates to you, even if you're not dealing with grief, because you're going to start to understand the intricacies of how deep you need to understand your client and how deep you need to connect with them to really be able to increase your conversions on the front end to get clients who sign with you, who work with your firm, but to also give them the best experience throughout. I can even think of like criminal attorneys would be another example of, somebody who, they were charged with a crime. Could be that they're not guilty, right? Could be that they're being charged of something that they're not guilty of in the real sense, meaning they never did it. Or it could be that, they're not guilty because of, technicalities. But at the end of the day, they're also going through some sort of process of working through emotions of being charged with that crime, needing to deal with it, needing to deal with the shame that comes with it and all of that. So I'm excited to jump into this conversation with John and see where this takes us. Let me just see if they didn't get me that episode yet. I'll share it with you as soon as I have it. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Moshe. That's a really awesome introduction. Thank you.
We try our best here. We try our best. John, as I alluded to already, told you in the green room, I want to start with just helping people understand who you are.
Yeah.
and on your screen it says Jock, and you told me John and Jock are the same
Yeah.
name when it comes to Scottish. So you're actually Scottish, correct?
Yes, I'm from a little place in the Highlands of Scotland called Loch Ness. Probably some of your listeners would have maybe heard about it. Yeah,
Well, yeah, we've heard of the monster, right? The
yeah.
Loch Ness monster.
I don't particularly believe in that, but yeah, it's a big thing for sure. And we used to live just above the mountain, and we overlook Loch Ness, so yeah, beautiful area.
Okay, awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to working with lawyers, and this new venture of yours of helping lawyers understand and navigate the grief process. Give us the backstory.
All right, so I mean, I was brought over here to the United States by publishers. I'm an author. I've written several books in spirituality and that have been published in various different languages as well throughout the world. And so, but I've also had a keen interest in law. Not that, I wanted to be a lawyer, but back in the day, when I was in the army as well, and I served as a paramedic in the army. And as I came out, and I had a friend of mine who was becoming a solicitor, and she would often ask me to help her with some of her work at university, and I really enjoyed it, and I really kind of got into it. And then when I came over to America, obviously I had to go through this whole immigration type process, and that was really interesting. I could see all the pitfalls and all the issues that happened there, and I just had a good interest in it. And I've been involved in, I'd like to say that the marketing industry in terms of publishing and publishing media over many years. And so I wanted to take that passion and develop a media platform for law firms and lawyers. And it was kind of funny because it was always, I thought in the back of my mind, if I have all these lawyers and I ever really need a good one, I'll have the cream of the crop to pick from. So it was a kind of bit of a selfish thing as well for my own benefit. But it just grew and the passion grew. And I saw there was a lot of directories and things out there, and I wanted to go a different way. I didn't want it just to be somewhere where you just listed. So I was very proactive and still am in the Help Lawyer platform, utilizing it really as a media platform for law firms, small law firms. But obviously, as I said, I came here as a spiritual teacher and as an expert in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology and things like that. And I've written for many national and international magazines over the world. And I saw, even when I was dealing with it in the legal industry, that there was a big misunderstanding and a potential for neglect to happen. And this was in the field of grief. Now, I help veterans with the grieving process. I help many individuals. I actually predominantly my work personally as a mentor, if you like, or a coach, as most people would understand it, to scientists and lawyers. And this idea about grieving started to rear its head, not just in the loss of maybe a loved one of the lawyer or a loss of a lawyer's client, a lawyer's client who's lost a loved one, but in family law and divorce law and criminal law, we they deal with death all the time, whether it's the death of a relationship, whether it's the death of in an accident, or whether it's even something of a toxic case. There's an element of death in it, and lawyers don't know how to deal with that. They have got no idea. So I decided to start educating more and doing more talks and to educate law firms more. And this is something I'm working on now, to understand this process and what it means, what grief actually means to them, and how it can benefit them to have a deeper understanding of this whilst they're dealing in their own personal lives or whilst they're dealing with clients' lives, which is very important. It's not just a number, and it's not just a media product that you put out there. It's a connection. It's an emotional connection. And I think the emotional connection in the legal field is more important.
Yeah, I love that, and thank you for filling in that backstory. Really interesting. And as I told you in the green room, we share a connection because I am a paramedic here in Rockland County, New York. and those of you who are listening who didn't know that about me, something that I love doing. It's a passion of mine. Just doesn't pay enough for it to be my primary career. So, but I love going out there and helping people in a different way than I do here in the legal industry. And you did that in the Army Corps. So I know what you went through there. And interestingly, we share in the early stages of the grief process there often with the surrounding people, you with soldiers around somebody who got injured but or killed, me around family members where somebody has died or somebody is going through an extreme medical crisis. I did find that episode that I alluded to earlier, so I'm going to just share it here. It's called "To Achieve Success: Spend a Day in Your Client's Shoes" with Jim Armstrong. It's episode 150. It's an older episode. It's been a while since we had that, but really, really good conversation with Jim around connecting with your client by really, and he talks about basically it was a relative of his, I think it was his stepson, was charged with a very serious crime. And he talks about what it was like emotionally to go through that process of finding out that he was charged with the crime and then going and trying to find him legal representation that they felt would be able to give him the best shot possible to with what he was charged with. And it's amazing the types of interactions that he shares that he had with law firm owners or lawyers that he met with that didn't get it. And then what it was like when he met with one that did. So go listen to that episode. It's episode 150. Really help you understand this conversation. But I've got Jock sitting here in front of me, and we're going to talk about grief. So tell me, what are there stages of grief? Like, what are the first things we need to understand when it comes to really getting what the person on the other side of the table is going through with whatever they have going on?
Well, first of all, Moshe, is to understand there is no such thing as a stages in grief, and that the stages that came was from Kubler-Ross way back in the day when she was actually dealing with people who were coming up to the loss. They were in hospital, they were dying, they were preparing for death, and so she recognized that these were stages. But the reality is that in the grieving process is there are no stages. That's a misunderstanding. There is no such thing as a stage in the grieving process, because the reality is that there's many different expressions. Like your friend who had dealt with his son and trying to find someone. He's grieving in a different expression to someone who's maybe lost a loved one. He's lost his son. He's not died, but he's lost his son. So there's a different expression. On a family lawyer, maybe dealing with a divorce, is a different expression of grief. And every one of those different expressions have different emotions attached to them. No such thing as stages, because one individual's grief is completely unique to another. A lawyer who may be grieving may have a little bit of empathy for someone else who's grieving, but a lawyer who hasn't lost anyone and is dealing with someone who's grieving may feel lost. So there's an element of understanding that you can go through what Kubler-Ross would say is all stages in literally the space of an hour, and it could be daily. And so you could be feeling these, your client could be feeling this. And so you don't want to come to them with, it's a stage. What stage are they going? I mean, the stage of anger, or in the stage of denial? Well, no, that's just misunderstood. That doesn't happen. So, and the other thing that I'll say, and this might be a bit of a shocker to everyone out there who's listening, you can't heal from grief, and you don't recover from it. It's impossible to heal from it. Why? Because it is a natural part of our evolution. We come into this world and we leave this world, and it's a natural part of life. And so you never heal from it, because it's always going to be there. And even if you've lost someone, no matter what the expression is, it's always going to be there in your mind. So one of the things I'll say is forget that to the side as well, and you don't recover from it. The reason you don't recover from it is because it's not a disease. It's not, you're not, addicted to drugs. It's not an addiction. And it's not something that's you have to recover from because it is natural. So that's the first thing I would want everybody to understand, no matter who they are, a client or a lawyer, that there is no way of healing from it, and there's no way of recovering from it. Those are just illusions. And you have to basically integrate it into your life and understand it. And this is what I want lawyers to get, this understanding. This is why I want to teach them more and to get them
So,
to understand it.
uh, okay, let's say that I get it, right? Like I understand that there aren't stages of grief.
Yeah.
Somebody could be in
Yeah.
any of those stages at any given moment, and they're not going to recover from this. Like they're not. It might be something that the 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 strength of it decreases over time. It gets more
Yeah.
dull, but it's always there. Like. And I don't know. I didn't lose a parent, but I have friends who've lost a parent, and they're, like how much they miss their parent. They always miss their parent. It's always there, but sometimes it's stronger than others. Sometimes they'll have this like breakdown and they're crying because they miss their parent right then. But other times they're going through their life and it seems like everything is great. And I think that's what you're explaining and you're saying here. My question is how do what do we put into practice? In other words, what is the real message for attorneys to understand is if I understand this, how does that change how I deal with clients when they come in? What are some practical things that I can do to support them in ways that maybe I'm not doing right now?
Well, here's a very simple thing that I teach. Now, I teach a model that I call AAC, awareness, acceptance, and choice. No matter if you're an attorney, no matter if you're in business, no matter if you've just lost a loved one, awareness, acceptance, and choice. To change anything in life, Moshe, we have to have an awareness of something. Once we have an awareness of it, we have to accept it and integrate it into our life. Then we have the choice and what to do with it. One of the things that I would say to lawyers when you're sitting with a client. And here's a very simple thing, guys, that you can do. I will never, if you've lost a loved one, I will never say, I'm sorry for your loss, because it's kind of a platitude that really doesn't really have any feeling or meaning in it, because you can't possibly understand their loss because it's unique to them. So what I would say to people, if you're an attorney, you're sitting from someone and it's been a wrongful death, or they've lost a loved one through a death, or even in a relationship, you don't want to come across like that. I'm sorry for your loss. Everybody hears it, and most people who are grieving don't like it. They don't want to hear it. So one of the things I would say is become part of their story, because we're built for storytelling. The whole world is built for, as human beings, we're great storytellers. So one of the things I say to people is get involved in the story. So I, rather than say, I'm sorry for your loss, I would say, tell me a little bit. Let's not get into the legal aspects for now. Let's make the connection, right? Tell me a little bit about your loved one. Let's say it's a death, a loss of death. Um, tell me about your loved one. Tell me about them. Let me know something funny about them, something you enjoyed about them. We don't want to say that we're sorry, because you can't really feel that, but we want to get involved in their story. We want to see them light up and feel that they can actually open up to you, and that you're a person who cares. You want to know their story. Don't go straight into what happened. Was it an accident? Did it? You'll get to that, but get to know them and and understand, be aware of the pain that they're feeling and the suffering that they're going through before you start getting to the ABCs and the legal aspects. And even if it's a relationship, then get to know that person, rather than, okay, so, you're getting divorced and I'm sorry to hear that. Well, they don't want to hear that. You just want to say, well, okay, how do you feel? Tell me a little bit about your life growing up. Tell me a little bit about, your relationship, anything, and then get to it. Make the emotional connection so that they feel they're being listened to, because everybody who is grieving, no matter the expression, and all the research I've done, and in the process, I'm in the process of doing a master's and a PhD in psychology for this at the moment, as well as running my business. And a lot of the research that I've carried out, most people feel unheard. and they feel disconnected. So if you're a lawyer that can make the connection, then you're going to take it to another level.
I love this simple idea that you share. And I'm going to share my from my own background how that I know it works. So the Jewish tradition when somebody dies is that we sit Shiva. And
Yeah.
that's a 7 day process where basically you're not allowed to do anything, and you basically are sitting on a low chair. The reason for that is, you're a mourner, so you're not supposed to be comfortable. You're supposed to feel the discomfort and the pain in other ways. But Shiva is all about people coming and visiting and sitting with you. And the whole idea is to give you an opportunity to tell stories about your loved one that you lost, and to also hear stories about them, because people come and they knew the person that died and they're sharing stories with you that you may not have heard or may not know. Um, and what's really interesting is that though that process really allows you to get relieved of the pain. Every time that you tell a story about the person, it just removes one little degree of the pain that you're feeling every time you hear a story. So the more that you talk about that person, the more you're able to wrap your head around the fact that they're gone. And I don't know about accepting the loss, but start to get accustomed to living with the loss. And so I love this idea of just basically turning your initial consult the first time you're meeting them into your own little personal Shiva with them, right? Like, it's just an
Brilliant.
opportunity to allow them to just share.
That's exactly. I mean, the Native Americans do it. Many other indigenous tribes do this kind of thing. We're built for storytelling, and if you can connect to someone's story, they connect to you emotionally. And if they can have their own, if a lawyer can have their own Shiva and sit with them before they get into all the the important needs and musts of the particular case, that takes them to a whole new level. And the feeling that they have is that they're being heard, they're connected, and that it's not filled with expectation of suffering. They're just helping to alleviate, they're being empathetic to them without, just going down the whole platitude route. And I think the great thing is imagine someone who says, you know what, my lawyer really cared, and they understood the pain that I was going through, and they never forced the issue, and they never tried to put anything on me that I wasn't ready for. Because you got to remember that everybody's pain's different, and every expression is different, and they're going to react in a different way. And here's the other thing, guys. For those of you, you'll find that if you're dealing with someone, whether it's a relationship loss, a business loss, anything else, or losing a loved one, they're not going to be able to think in the way that you're going to think, right? Their thought process is going to be completely different. You have to be their guide and their mentor. Just as I guide and mentor lawyers, you have to be their guide and their mentor, to sow seeds in them, to guide them. Because remember that this grief that they're going through is a journey. It's not something they recover from or heal from. It's a journey that we all will go on. So best learn from that journey. Grief can be your greatest nemesis, or it can be your greatest teacher. It's up to you how you accept it.
Yeah, I love that. One follow-up question I have for you is,
Sure.
we we talked about this idea of just letting them talk about this person, and that's really good for them.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of a two-faced question. The first part is that's on the first time we meet them, right? So we're giving them that opportunity. But now, if they choose to work with us and we're engaging with them, we don't want to always be down
No.
to business, right? So how is it every time that we're meeting, we're giving them another opportunity to share? Where How does that work throughout the client engagement? And then second to that is, on the flip side, there's a risk to connecting with somebody on that level,
Yeah.
because now they might be a little bit confused about your role, and
Yeah.
they see you as somebody that they can go to pour their heart out to. They can go to for support. You're almost like their therapist now. how do you set yourself up so that you're having the right combination of
Mhm.
being there for them and letting them know that you understand, you get them, and giving them the opportunity, but at the same time not creating a relationship that perhaps is not a good one for you to have when you're the attorney, because you can't get anything done if they're calling you every 10 minutes,
Absolutely.
using you as their sounding board. So how do we navigate all of that?
So I mean, that's actually quite easy. It sounds like yeah, it could be a problem, but it's not, because it's like if we set something up, we set up a golf ball on a tee, we set up the golf ball on the tee to take the swing and hit the ball. So it's initially in our meeting, we're going to do it. We're not just going to listen to them all the time and let them pour out their heart. We're going to show a bit of empathy. We're going to show them that we're understanding. We're going to connect with them, and then we're going to set the scene. We're going to set the scene as this is okay, this is how we're going to operate, this is how we're going to work. And just to let them know that you're not going to pressurize them, you understand them. But there'll be certain procedures that will have to go through, and you'll be able to, remind them of that, and that you're not available 24/7 for a chat. This is the initial consultation, as you're showing the empathy, you're making the connection, but also in that consultation, you also have to set up with, okay, these are the things we're going to have to go through. You might not be ready for that just now, but I just want to let you know, this is what we have to do. And we'll go through that as we go on with things, but understand that I know how I can empathize with how you're feeling, and I don't want to put pressure on you, but just be aware this is what we're going to do. And in the next meeting, then we'll take one stage at a time. Now that's the lawyer stages, not the grief stages, because we don't
Right, right.
want. But we'll take one stage at a time. So you want to set it up, right? You just want to set it up right from the outset, so that, because the lawyer's not a counselor, but you're not a counselor, but it doesn't stop you sitting in Shiva and listening to stories and giving stories, does it? And it
No.
doesn't take you away from your, and at the end of the day, in your faith, you understand what Shiva means, and people understand what it means. So that's already been set up for you. So the lawyer can set it up in such a way that shows empathy, gets the understanding, creates the connection, and then sets the scene.
I really love this because, and this is the business person in me that, we're going to move away from the empathetic for a second.
Yeah.
But not really, but really what you're laying out is it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship. Like when you're meeting with a client right now, and you see somebody on the other side of the table, you need to figure out, how am I going to convince them that I'm the right attorney for them and get them to sign with me? Right? Like there's a lot of people out there, and maybe I'm not the best of the best. Maybe I don't have the best sales pitch for them, and I'm just hoping that they're going to choose me. Here, when you ask them to share and you empathize with them, it gives you the door to then tell them, here's what we're going to do next. And when you give them the next steps, you're not asking them, do you want to work with me? You're not telling them, oh, I know you're going to go and interview 5 other attorneys. No, you're approaching the
Yeah.
conversation from simply, I'm going to support you in the best way possible. And here's what's the next best thing for you. Here's the next thing that you need to do. And you can even come at them and hey, I'm not going to have them sign in the first meeting.
No.
I'm just going to tell them, look, I know that there's so much for you to handle and to deal
Mhm.
with right now, and this is the last thing that you want to be dealing with, and I understand that, and you shared this incredible person with me, and I value that.
Yeah.
So here's what we're gonna do. We're not going to do anything today, but what we're going to do is we're going to set the next meeting, and we're going to come back and you'll have an opportunity to share a little bit more with me, but we're also going to switch gears, and
Yeah.
we're going to start talking about your legal issue. um,
Perfect.
but in that conversation, you're also going to have to retain me. And the way it works is you don't have to pay anything up front. We're gonna, if this is a wrongful death, for example, it's a
Yeah.
contingency case. You don't have to pay anything up front.
Mm.
We're gonna front all of the expenses for your case. We just want to get you the best possible outcome, but we're not going to talk about that now. Go home, go be with your family, go, and let's come back in a few days and have that next conversation. So when you're doing that, what you're doing is you're basically just leading them. Like this is the next step. And because you empathize with them, they're just gonna be like, oh, okay, okay, that's the next thing I need to do. No problem. They've already found their lawyer. They're not looking for
And
anybody else.
that's it. And there's two little things that I'll add to that is one of the things that and I would kind of disagree with. I don't want a lawyer to go and say I want to get you the best possible outcome. It's not a personal injury case, right? And that's one of the things. But I would like them to, before they get to that point, to say is to let them know that, well, I'm here to unburden you. I want to make your burden less heavy. By me doing this, that's going to be one less burden on you. And then later on, we can say, we're going to get the best outcome for you. But let them know we want to unburden. And when you come in to sit with your client, I've witnessed a lot of lawyers, they're going to say, hello, Mr. Smith, or hello, Mrs. Robertson, or something like that. There's something more natural in a case like this to go and say, hi, Susie, how are you? And make that emotional connection straight away rather than being very formal about it. Because remember, this is not a business essentially like a business legal transaction that way. This is someone's life and emotion. And so if we can immediately come off that way, and then we can let them know that we're unburdened and we're there to help them with their burden to get the best outcome, that makes a big difference.
Now, do you think that you need to ask permission to call them by their first name? Like, would you say, is it okay if I call you Susie? Or or do you ask like, what would you like me to call you? What is the right approach to that? Or is it just use their name and just move on?
In this case, normally people would say ask permission. In this case, I'm always like, well, you ask forgiveness rather than permission afterwards. I would rather, and people may disagree with me, but I would rather come straight out the bat because they might be a little bit shocked and it's kind of, that makes them feel good because they're using their first name. It's very formal, straight, after, say Mr. Smith, whatever. I would just use the first name straight away. If they don't like it, then you can say, hey, Susie, do you mind if I call you Susie? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Straight away, you've still said, hi, Susie, how are you? Do you mind if I call you Susie? You're covering everything rather than coming straight out and being formal. Hi there, do you mind if I call you Susie? Is that okay?
Right. Yeah.
It's a very small, subtle nuance in there, but a massive difference it makes to someone's psyche.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We started our conversation today, and I was like, "Am I calling you John or am I calling you Josh?" Right? Like, it's a very natural. Like, if I'm not sure what the name is, it's a very natural question to ask. So, and I did say, hi, John first, and then ask you that. So I think we do that naturally.
You'll notice I never met you, and I came straight up and say, "Hi, Moshe, how are you doing?"
Yes. You did.
As if I knew you.
You did. And I felt like you knew. I was like, wait, have we met before? Did I miss something?
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very true. And it's the way that you say it, right? Like,
yes.
And there are some telemarketers who are really good at this, and it really pisses me off when they do it, because my phone will ring and it's an unknown number, and I'll answer it, and they'll say hello to me like they're my best friend, and I'll be like, I'm sorry, do I know you? Oh, yes. And some of them try to come off and say like, oh, yes, we've spoke before. And I know we haven't spoken before. Like that is, that is a no. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back here. I mean, we're unfortunately we're just about out of time. And this is, I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg, but I feel like we also got so many hints and pointers that are very easy to do. Like, you can from this conversation, you can completely change the way you interact with somebody when they first come in and change the dynamic. And for those of you who are in family law, because I think we have a lot more listeners in family law than wrongful death. For those of you in family law, if you just take this and understand that your client who's coming in, who's, a divorcee, right? Or they're going to be, they're dealing with a type of death also.
Yeah.
So, and maybe this is something that you can talk about for a quick moment, because how would they turn and ask their potential client to share? Like, you don't want them to, tell me a little bit about your spouse, right? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, that's not going to go down well because the woman's sitting there and says, well, he was a narcissistic anyway. That, I mean, you're creating negative emotion. So you can turn that about them and get to know them, right? So it's they're still dealing with a loss, but you want to get to know them. And so I would come out with getting to know them by doing the same salutations, being natural with them and say, hi, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how are you feeling, how are you coping at the moment, how are you doing at the moment? What brought you to this decision? And slowly bring in, rather than saying, yeah, so you want to get divorced? Yep, let's get them. Or, we can get them and we can get everything. There is going to be emotionally charged anger there. There's going to be a negative emotion within the person who's going through that. So it's important to really make them feel that you hear them, you're connected to them. So get to know them, before you go into the whole loss. So yeah, tell me, before we get into it, tell me a little bit about yourself. What kind of got you to this, decision. And as they're telling you the story, edify them, pick up on something, go a bit deeper and ask them another question. You're creating you're creating that connection even more. And you have to understand, and you can tell them, this is a grieving process you're going to be going through. This is loss. And I understand that. And so we have to deal with that in a very empathetic and understandable way, but to make sure that I unburden you with what you have to deal with, and that we get you the better outcome.
I love it, Jock. Thank you. So when we wrap up an episode here, I leave my guest with two questions. So I'm going to pose those two questions to you now. The first is, what's one parting piece of wisdom advice that you have for our listeners? And the second is, how can they get in touch with you? They connected with you. They want to follow you, take the next steps with you. I know you're an author. You wrote 4 books. There's a lot going on in your world. What's the best next step for them to take to perhaps learn more about the topic that we're talking about today?
Okay, so I would say my first tip for any lawyer out there is learn to listen. Is more than what you want to do. The greatest gift that you can give is the gift of service. The gift of service comes from you with your power to listen. And the minute you can listen to someone, the minute you can connect with them emotionally and actually deep listen to them, they're already choosing you as their lawyer. And I would say, for any law firm out there or any lawyers who are interested and want to learn more, you can connect with me on help-lawyer.com. You can send in a message from there. You can easily find that I have many different websites, and my books are all over the place. So Brocas, jobbrokers.com, which is where I write about grief a lot. And but if you're really interested, you want me to come to your firm, you want me to set up a speaking day where I teach your lawyers how to deal with this, or how to cope with it, then just connect with me on Help Lawyer. I'd love to connect with you there. And if you're already a member of Help Lawyer, then you know how to get me anyway. So we'll see.
Awesome. Jock, thank you very much for sharing. We will put all of this in the show notes as well, so you do not have to remember if you're out for a run, driving your kids to school, whatever you're doing while you're listening to this podcast. Everything is in the show notes and can also be found at our website, profitwithlaw.com. Our website has recently had an overhaul. So when you go to profitwithlaw.com, you're going to want to click on the free resources section in order to find the podcast and the show notes page. I'm also going to mention that we have an amazing YouTube channel. We launched it in March of 2023. It's brand new, just about 8 months old at this point. And we've got approaching 20,000 views on the channel, a couple of hundred videos up there already. So a lot of really good shorts. So if you want to just have a quick hit, a quick dose of something valuable and useful, go there and check it out. You can easily find it at profitwithlaw.com/YouTube. We'll take you straight to our YouTube channel. And I invite you to explore our website, see ways that you can work with us if you are looking for some solutions in your business. And folks, we would love it if you leave a review for our podcast. I did this on the last interview I just hosted, and I'm going to do this now again. I'm just going to pick a review that was left on our podcast and read it off. If you leave a review, we'll do the same with yours. So this is a review by JF in New York City. Moshe asks for actionable tips. It's a 5-star review. It says Moshe understands his listeners want actionable tips, so he asks questions to elicit best practices from his guests. Great conversations, all caps on the word great. Love that review. And the truth is I didn't realize that I was doing that. I mean, I know I do it, but I didn't realize that was something that somebody would pick up on. But we just did it here. John had a great conversation, talked to us about, what you need to understand about understanding somebody's grief. And then I turned around and I said, okay, so like, what is the application of it? How do we actually go about doing that in our firm? And now you're leaving this episode with specific things that you can do in your law firm to get more clients and do a better job of understanding your clients and relating to your clients so they have a better overall experience. I really love this conversation. As brief as it was, I got so much out of it. Really appreciate you being here, Jock. And folks, looking forward to catching you on our next interview coming in a week from now. We release a new episode every single Thursday. Excited to be sharing the next guest with you. And until then, take some of these action steps and see what they do for you. I'm sure that you're going to notice immediate results by putting them into action. Take care.